So the title of this video is Lies That Art Teachers Tell, but really it's just all these different things that are kind of going around that I hear from my students all the time that they've either heard from somebody else or read. And see, these are just a lot of myths that you may have heard, and I just want to go through them one by one. So the first one is the idea about northern light. You might hear that northern light is best. And some artists even say that, that if you're not painting in northern light, that your painting quality will suffer. And that is a complete myth. The reason that artists originally talked about northern light was because if you are in the northern hemisphere, this would be in Australia, or in the southern hemisphere it would be southern light, but in the northern hemisphere it's northern light simply because you don't want direct sunlight coming into your studio. So if you have a window that's facing south, either in the roof or in a high wall or whatever, then you're going to have, especially during the summer or actually winter too, direct sunlight coming in to your studio, which makes it impossible to work with. So really what you want is indirect light. So northern facing light is going to be not direct sunlight, but because the sun is in the to the south, and even during the middle of the summer it might get straight overhead, but it never gets to the north, and so you don't have this direct sunlight coming in if you have a northern facing window or light source. But beyond that, and where the myth comes in, is that there's this special quality to this light. But there's only two qualities in light that we really care about, or I should say three. The first is the intensity, in other words, how bright it is. It can't be too dim or even too bright like direct sunlight. But it also needs to be, the color needs to be, technically it's 5200 K, and that's just you will see on a lot of light bulbs, daylight bulbs, they're 5000 K, which is almost exactly like northern light temperature, basically. So as long as your light is the right color and has the right intensity, then you're fine. There's one other quality that light can have, and that is called CRI, which is color rendering index. A lot of light bulbs don't even list this, but if you go into the detailed specifications of whatever light you're having, you should be able to find or look up the CRI. So northern light would be 100 CRI, but you can buy light bulbs that are 100 CRI. They tend to be more expensive. My studio light bulbs are 95 CRI, which is plenty good enough, and I tell my students anything above 85 is fine. But that's the other quality. So this idea about northern light having special quality, or that you shouldn't be using electric lights to paint under, is complete nonsense. The wonderful thing about electric light is that it's consistent and it doesn't change throughout the day, and that can make a big difference into just your ability to color check and things like that. All right, and there's one other thing, and this is just kind of funny to me, and that is that if you look up on online and you look for artist studio light, almost all of those lights, it may be all of them, but the vast majority of those lights are spotlights, and you do not want a spotlight on your canvas. You need a broad wash of light so that your photo, source image, your canvas, and your palette and your entire work area needs to be well lit. So it actually needs to be a very soft light, a light that just kind of lights everywhere evenly, and you do not want just a spotlight on your painting. That'll work if you're displaying a painting or hanging a painting on a wall. You can put a light, because the only thing you need lit if you're hanging it on the wall is the painting itself. But if you're talking about a studio light, we need to see everything, including your palettes and your photo. Another myth you might have heard, and this stops a lot of people from getting into oil painting, is that oil painting is toxic, or that it has harmful fumes to breathe. But that really comes from the type of medium that you use. So if you're using a medium, like the Geneva paint has a medium already mixed into it, but it has no solvents, it doesn't have anything harmful at all to breathe. So you can use oil paints Some people talk about walnut oil as if walnut oil is better than linseed oil, but walnut oil is no safer to breathe. It's just as harmful, or rather, linseed oil and walnut oil are equal in terms of toxicity of the smell or anything else. So buying walnut-based paints is, in my view, less than ideal, simply because linseed oil makes better and stronger long-term paint films than walnut oil or poppy seed oil or safflower oil or any of the other drying oils that they use in place of linseed oil. So linseed oil is the best, and it's just as non-toxic as anything else. There is something called boiled linseed oil, which furniture, people that finish furniture use, but we will never ever use boiled linseed oil. That is completely, that can be toxic because they put dryers in it. But if you're just talking about regular old linseed oil, which is in what every oil paint uses, then it's completely non-toxic, as long as the solvent that you're using or the medium that you're thinning it down with isn't toxic. In other words, has harmful solvents in it, like mineral spirits or turpentine or something like that. That's where the toxicity comes into paint. So that's another myth. Another myth is that you need 20 or 30 colors in your palette, and there's all these special colors like raw umber or Naples yellow, or just a whole long list of these special colors that you need to achieve particular results. But you really only need the 5 colors, and these I talk about. It's the ones that I use to do all my painting classes in, and those 5 colors are actually the 5 colors in the Geneva Essential Palette, which is the paint that we make. Now, so these 5 colors can mix any color in the world absolutely perfect, where you cannot tell the difference between one or another. So if I mix up raw umber or Naples yellow using the 5 colors, it's going to be exactly the same color as the authentic Naples yellow, or whatever you're trying to match. The few colors that you can't mix are the super vivid colors, that you might see in like stained glass window or something, where you have a real pop blue-green, which is why you need just a few specialty colors if you're ever mixing those super vibrant colors, which I almost never use. So you only need 5 colors to paint oil painting, and maybe a few others if you're doing specialty things. When I painted portraits for years, I never used anything other than the 5 colors, except in rare cases. I can only think of 3 portraits in my entire career that I needed something other than those 5 colors. Okay, another myth you might have heard, or maybe you just presumed, but you do not need natural talent to paint highly realistic oil paintings. That is a complete myth. I've taught many people that couldn't even draw a stick figure, in their own words, and they've come to be some of my best, most accomplished students. So that is absolutely not a thing. Now, there are some cases where people might have dementia, or they have psychological problems or whatever, and they can't sit down and actually, work at a tedious task for a long time, which is required. But in terms of just having natural talent, it is absolutely not needed to paint highly realistic oil paintings. Okay, another myth, and I actually have a video all about this, but is that there are rules of composition, or rules that you should follow when you're trying to compose your scene. And the reality is there are absolutely no rules. There's not a single rule of composition that you can't tell me that I can't go find a beautiful masterpiece painting that breaks that rule. So just think about that. Think about the fact that, okay, rule of thirds, or rule of odds, or whatever the rule is, you can go and find a beautiful painting that breaks that rule. So that is something that it all comes down to, if you compose something and you like the way it's composed and it appeals to you, that's all that matters. And that's the only rule, if there is any rule, is that you like it. And it's your taste that actually is going to decide what is, whether a painting is good or not to your own eye. Which brings me to another big myth that I hear all the time, and I get this from my students. they'll say, well, I'm not educated in art, or I don't, I've never studied art. So therefore, I'm not sure if this painting's any good or not. That is an absolute myth that is pushed often by, collectors of art, art teachers, even the museums and the galleries, push that there's some sort of mystery. But the reality is, if you look at a painting or a photograph for that matter, and you love it, that's all there is to it. There's nothing else to it. And it's just learning to trust your own taste. And in fact, and I've said this many times, if my students love something and they want to paint it, and I absolutely hate it and think it's garbage and I would never hang it in my house, but if they love it, they should paint it, because you have to follow your own taste. There's nothing else. You can go and study other paintings and learn from other artists and everything else, but ultimately it's going to be your own taste that you have to follow. It's your only guidepost. And if you're not following your own taste, you're just following somebody else's taste. So that's really important to understand. You do not need an art education to know what you like or to appreciate art. In fact, sometimes an art education can ruin your appreciation for art, or mislead you and think that something's important that's not important. Another myth is using quality brushes is important. And it is not important at all. You can paint, you give me some old bushy brushes that are just, horrible junk brushes, I can still paint a beautiful painting with those brushes. It does not matter. Now, I do say that I like the filbert brushes, and you can go see that in my supply list at drawmixpaint.com. At the top of the website, there's a supply list, and you can go see actually the brushes that I recommend, which are filberts, as opposed to round brushes or square brushes. But the bottom line is that it's really not a big deal at all, and you can use any old brushes you want. Some work better than others in terms of being able to paint lines or to get full coverage on the canvas, but it's really not a big deal at all. Okay, another one is that a lot of my students will enter these art competitions, which are everywhere, and they just assume that if they didn't win first prize, or maybe they weren't even considered, that their painting must not be that great. But these art contests, by and large, the people who make the judgment about who's going to win the contest or not, are not really using their own taste and saying, boy, I just love this painting. It's not that. It's typically like there's either a fad, or they're trying to, they like a certain type of style of painting, or whatever it is. And a lot of these people are people that have been to the universities and have been brainwashed by all the garbage that they hear, and so they're making their judgments based on that. And a lot of times it's just a political decision. They're saying, well, I like this artist because his subject matter is the type of subject matter that I like, or whatever it is, because for some political reason, and I don't mean politics specifically, but just sort of like what everybody else is thinking, or what is the popular style at the time. So I would not put any weight into these art contests, and even the best ones in the world are really primarily, it's a political decision more than them just loving artwork. And I always go back to Van Gogh, who's the most popular artist in the world, and he was never recognized. So if he would have entered any art contests back in his day, he wouldn't even been accepted probably. And yet he's one of the greatest artists in terms of popularity the world has ever seen. So and it's no different today. It's not like people today have gotten smarter and now the judges of art contests know what they're talking about. So anyway, that's just something to consider, before you put your art in an art show and have your feelings hurt, because it's definitely not anything that is important in my view. Okay, another one that I hear a lot of is that you should use the brightest white that you can get, and that having a bright white is better. And for me, it means nothing. It absolutely means nothing. The difference between every single major brand of white, whether it's flake white or whether it's titanium white or zinc white or whether it's made with linseed oil or made with safflower oil. You know, people will post all these different whites and show you these slight differences that you can only see under a bright light when you're comparing the two side by side, and it means nothing. And the reason it means nothing is because I almost never paint with pure white. I'm always tinting my white one way or another. So you might say, well, flake white has these, you know, yellow undertones, which is another word that I think is nonsense. This whole idea that, you know, colors have these undertones, these special mysterious undertones that come out, you know, when you paint. There's no such thing. You know, a color is a color is a color. You know, if you say, well, it has blue undertones, that just means it's more blue. There's no such thing as undertones, or that there's this mysterious mixing quality that colors have. You know, if you take a titanium white, which is a more pure white than like a flake white, which can be more slightly creamy, you know, I can just put some orange, just a little bit of yellow and red in my titanium white, and now my color is way more warm than any flake white that you could buy. So this idea that you need a special white that has to be super brilliant in white is just nonsense. It really makes no difference at all. Another one is that you should wait 3 to 6 months before you varnish a painting, but actually if your painting is dry, completely dry to the touch, and I don't mean like a skin over the top, but I mean dry all the way through, the moment it's dry all the way through, you can varnish it. And that can be as soon as like 2 weeks, or really just as soon as that painting is dry, it's ready to be varnished. Now, if you wait 6 months before you varnish, you're more likely to get dust and grime or whatever get into your paint surface, and then when you put that varnish on top, it's going to seal in all that dust and grime. So I like to varnish my paintings just as soon as they're solid and good and dry. I don't mean sticky, I mean thoroughly dry. Then it's ready to be varnished, and there's no harm in you know, doing it early, and you do not have to wait 3 months or 6 months before you varnish. Now, if you varnish early, you may have to varnish again in a year or 2 years. And maybe if you wait 6 months, you know, it might be 3 or 4 years before you have to revarnish. And when I say revarnish, I mean if you're putting like a satin or a glossy varnish on your painting, over time it can become matte as it sinks into the oil over time. But again, it's not a problem to varnish your painting just as soon as it's thoroughly dry to the touch. This is just a real simple one. I recommend acrylic primed linen, and that means not just raw linen canvas and painting on that, but you need to put a primer or something that's going to seal the raw fibers of the linen, and you don't want that oil to penetrate through your primer and get into the fibers of the cloth. So you don't want to paint on raw canvas. But if you do buy primed canvas, which I do, acrylic primed is actually better than oil primed. So not a big deal, but the oil primes tend to be more expensive, but actually the acrylic primed is better. Okay, another one is that if you're going to do figure drawing, that you need to study anatomy in order to be able to do that well. And I just don't understand that at all. I think you can learn to paint figures just by painting what you see and using the same principles that you would, or doing the penciling the same way that I teach for doing still life is exactly the same way that I would teach to do figure drawing. And you can do figure drawing all day long and never have to study anatomy. It's just what you see. Okay, another myth is that it takes years or even decades to become a master oil painter. And that is just simply not true. I've had students that are painting beautiful paintings on their first, second, third try, paintings that could be put into a gallery. And I could show you a whole list of beautiful masterpiece paintings that are just first-time student paintings. So that is not something. Now, you will certainly grow as an artist and you will learn many things over time. But really, in terms of painting what you see, you can do it right out of the gate. You do not have to spend 10 years learning how to oil paint. And this last one is just something that's kind of been, you know, it's just bugged me personally, because I have a paint company and we don't play any of these games, but the games that all the major paint companies play, and it's just something that's been going on forever, is that they put, when you go look at a price of an oil paint, they'll say list price or retail price, and then they put our price. And the our price is usually about half of what the list price is or the retail price. Well, the reality is there is no list price. There is no retail price. But on Geneva, we don't do that. We could easily go in there and say, list price, $30. Our price, $15, and then everybody feels happy like they're getting a deal. There might be some art stores like, boutique art stores up in a tourist town up in the mountains or something that sells it for that retail price. But I have never seen those paints sold for those prices. So anyway, these are just some list of things. I hope you found this video interesting. We now have our Geneva Fine Art, my paint company. We now have our purple in stock, and it's in the store. So if you haven't checked that out, go check that out now. Our paint is non-toxic, has no fumes whatsoever, has the medium already mixed into it, so you just squirt it out and use it. And also our burn umber dries very slow because we put clove oil in it, and that keeps it from drying. Normally it would dry in 8 hours, but our burn umber dries like in a week, so that you can pre-mix your colors and they won't start drying on you immediately. But anyway, go check that out at genevafineart.com, and if you're interested in taking art classes from me, email me at mark@drawmixpaint.com, and I'll give you all the information about my private classes, both here in Austin and also online. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.